Hi guys, in this video we'll be looking at Mahatma Gandhi and the nationalist movement, civil disobedience and beyond. Okay, and in this chapter you'll see Gandhiji's activities in India during the crucial period of 1915 to 1948. It explores his interactions with the different sections of the Indian society and the popular struggles that he inspired and led. It introduces a student to the different kinds of sources and historians use in reconstructing the career of a leader and of the social movements that he is associated with. Okay, leadership. A leader announces himself. Okay, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned to his homeland after 2 decades, 20 years of residence abroad. So in that he studied in London and he worked as a lawyer in Africa, led the movement in Africa. Okay, as a historian, Chandran Devasanan has remarked, Africa was the making of Mahatma. Okay, it was in South Africa that Mahatma Gandhi first forged the distinctive techniques of non-violent protest. In the previous video, we have seen the kind of actions by the rebels. The violent actions could not give us freedom. Okay, it was kind of a failure in the sense that the British, if you look at it, they had control over us as a legally, militarily, and politically. So all this aspect had to be challenged. So we saw militarily it was nearly impossible, politically also that much. But how can we get freedom by legal methods? And here comes a lawyer from Africa, and that was Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, the India that Mahatma Gandhi came back to in 1915 was rather different from that one he had left in 1893. Although still a colony of British, it was far more active in political sense. The Indian National Congress now had branches almost all over the country. Okay, and there were main leaders over there were Bal Gangadhar Tilak of Maharashtra, Bipin Chandra Pal of Bengal, Lala Lajpat Rai of Punjab. All these people were there, but still there was also division of moderates and conservatives also. And Mahatma Gandhi often identified himself to be a moderate. Okay, and in the initial year, 1 year, due to Gokhale's advice, Gandhiji spent 1 year traveling around the country, looking at how the social structure of the country was, what he was able to, how he can influence the common people. All these aspects were looked on by Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, and there was an event in which the opening of Banaras Hindu University on February 1916. Okay, among the invitees there were huge, highly elite classes of the country. Philanthropists were there, princes were there, and officers were there, congress leaders were there, and Gandhi was invited because his work in Africa. Okay, so when Gandhiji spoke in the conference or in the inauguration ceremony, what he said? He said, certainly a most gorgeous show, but he worried about the contrast between the richly bedkinded noblemen. See, all these national leaders, they never identified themselves with the poor peasants. Okay, there is no salvation in India unless you strip yourself of this jewelry and hold it in trust for your countrymen in India. There can be no spirit of self-government about us, he went on. If we take away or allow others to take away from the peasants almost the whole of the results of their labor, our salvation can only come through the farm labor. Our salvation can only come through the farmer. Neither the lawyers nor the doctors nor the rich landlords are going to secure it. It could only be brought in by the common man. Okay, so it was an eye-opening event for the leaders over there, and it merely diminished. And Gandhiji was looking for an opportunity in which he could engage with the people. Okay, and he found an opportunity at the annual congress held in Lucknow in December 1916. He was approached by a peasant from Champaran in Bihar who told him about the harsh treatment of the peasants by the British indigo planters. So Mahatma Gandhi went to Champaran, okay, seeking to obtain the peasants' security of tenure. Okay, and Gandhiji was involved in 2 campaigns in his home state of Gujarat. First, he intervened in labor dispute in Ahmedabad, demanding better working conditions for the textile mill workers. Then he joined the peasants in Kheda in asking for the state for the remission of taxes following failure of their harvest. Okay, these initiatives in Champaran, Ahmedabad, and Kheda marked Gandhiji out of a nationalist with a deep sympathy for the poor. At the same time, these were also localized struggles. Then in 1919, the colonial rulers delivered into Gandhi's lap an issue from which he could construct as much wider movement. Now, during the First World War, British had instituted censorship on the press and permitted detention without trial. Okay, now what happened? A recommendation of the committee chaired by Sir Sidney Rowlett. These tough measures were continued. In response, Gandhiji called for a countrywide campaign against the Rowlett Act. Okay, almost all the towns and states in the North India participated in the Bandh call. What happened? It was actually most of these officers were kind of like exhausted with the work, and they wanted kind of incentives from the British government, and they were received with the Rowlatt Act. So they participated in the Bandh with Gandhiji, and many Congress leaders were arrested, and in the end, the situation in the province of Amritsar, where the British brigadier ordered his troops to open fire on the nationalist meeting. Okay. In Jallianwala Bagh. Okay. In that, Rowlatt Satyagraha was called off, but it identified, kind of created a national leader image for Gandhiji. Okay. Emboldened by its success, Gandhiji called for the campaign of non-cooperation with the British rule. Okay. Now, Indians have seen the power of these non-violent movements. So what happened? They left their schools, colleges, lawyers left their law courts and not paying taxes. In some, they were not adhered to the governmental laws. They were not following the government's laws. Okay. So in the case of a revolt against the British in 1857, before the British captured they began the war against the rebels, they imposed certain laws in which you can, if a person identifies a rebel, they will be rewarded. All these kind of laws were imposed by the British. When Gandhiji came, he actually was against laws. So the British were in a fix. They cannot impose laws because the people are against the laws. That is the whole point. Okay. Then knitting a popular movement. Gandhiji hoped that by coupling non-cooperation with Khilafat. So this is actually, according to the far-right movements, this is a negative viewpoint because Khilafat was a totally external issue, nothing related to India as such. So in order to impress or in order to gain the support of Muslims, Gandhiji combined non-cooperation with Khilafat movement. These movements certainly enlarged a surge of popular action that was altogether unprecedented. So colonial India never saw this kind of movement. Okay, and same thing happened. The students stopped going to school, lawyers refused to attend court, and there were 396 strikes in 1921 involving 6 lakh workers and a loss of 7 million work days. Okay, the countryside was seething and discontented. Okay, now you will see what happened in the countryside. Peasants of Kunun refused to carry loads for colonial officials, and peasants and leaders other interpreted and acted and called upon non-cooperate with the colonial rule in ways that the best suited their interest. Non-cooperation, wrote Mahatma Gandhi. American biographer Louis Fisher, became the name of an epoch in the life of India and of Gandhiji. Non-cooperation was negative enough to be peaceful and positive enough to be effective. It entailed denial, renunciation, and self-discipline. It was training for what? It was training for self-rule. A nationalist idea or a unified nation, a concept of unified nation was ought to be created through these movements. As a consequence, the non-cooperation movement, the British Raj was shaken to its foundations for the first time since the revolt of 1857. Then on February 1922, a group of peasants attacked and torched the police station in the hamlet of Chauri Chora. So this led what? This led to Gandhiji calling off the movement because it was meant to be a peaceful protest, but it turned out to be violent. During the non-cooperation movement, thousands of Indians were put in jail. Gandhiji himself was put in jail for what? Sedition. So the judgment of the judge is important, somewhat important. If you want to quote in essays or in mains answer writing, it will be if it is necessary, just go through it. Judge Burham, if the course of events in India should make it possible for the government to reduce. He was actually sentenced for 6 years in jail. So judge said that if the course of events in India should make it possible for the government to reduce the period and release you, no one will be better placed than the judge, because Gandhi actually broke the colonial law, so he had to be punished by the court. But the judge itself says like it was for a positive cause. The cause was right. So the judge said because it is written in the law only, he is punishing Gandhi. So by 1922, Gandhiji had transformed Indian nationalism there by redeeming the promise he made in his Banaras Hindu University speech of February 1916. It was no longer a movement of professionals and intellectuals. Now hundreds of thousands of peasants, workers, and artisans also participated in it. Okay, and many of them saw Gandhiji as Mahatma or Maharaja Mahatma Gandhi. All these aspects were given to Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, this identification was strikingly reflected in his address as a nationalist leader. Those time nationalist leaders were wearing Western suit or an Indian bandgala as an elite class. But Gandhiji at the same time wore a simple dhoti or loincloth. Okay, and meanwhile he spent part of his each day working on chakra, spinning wheel, and encouraged other nationalists to do likewise. Okay, and it created a link between the common people and Gandhiji. Okay, and uh, here are some incidents. At Badhani, Gandhiji addressed the local public, and then the train started for Gorakhpur. There were less than 15,000 to 20,000 people at Nankar, Daria, Gauri Bazar, Chauri Chora, and Kusmi. Gandhiji was very pleased to witness the scene in Kusmi, as despite the fact the station was in the middle of a jungle where no less than 10,000 people here live. Okay, some overcome with their love as seen crying. Okay, in there are people wanted to give donations to Gandhiji, but he asked them to give it at Gorakhpur. But in Chauri Chora, one Marwari gentleman managed to hand over something to him. Then there was no stopping. A sheet was spread, currency notes and coins started raining. Such was the love for the people towards Mahatma Gandhi. Wherever Gandhi went, rumors spread of his miraculous powers. In some places, it was said that now we will look at the rumors and how the countryside reacted to Mahatma Gandhi's actions. Okay, in some places, it was said that he had been sent by the king to redress the grievances of the farmer. Then what? There were also stories of reporting dire consequences for those who opposed him. Rumors spread on how villagers who criticized Gandhiji found their houses mysteriously falling apart or their crops failing. Okay, knowing various lists, Gandhi Baba, Gandhi Maharaj, or simply as Mahatma Gandhi appeared to the Indian peasant as a savior or a messiah. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi was of a caste of a merchant, a profession lawyer, but his simple lifestyle and love for working with his hands allowed him to empathize more fully with the laboring poor, and for them in turn to empathize with him, where most other politicians talk down to them. Okay, and because it created a link between Mahatma Gandhi and the common people. While Mahatma Gandhi's own role was vital, the growth we might call the Gandhian nationalism also depended on substantial extent on his followers. Between 1917 and 1982, a group of highly talented Indians attached themselves to Gandhiji. Now his background team taking place. Okay. Jawaharlal Nehru was there, Sarojini Naidu was there, Abdul Kalam Azad was there, Mahadev Desai was there, Vallabhbhai Patel was there. All these were close associates of Gandhiji, came from different regions as well as different religious traditions. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi was released from prison on to February 1924. Now chose to devote his attention for the promotion of Khadi and abolition of untouchability. For Gandhiji was a much social reformer as he was a politician. Okay, Satyagraha, a case study. For several years after non-cooperation movement, Mahatma Gandhi focused on his social reform work. So in 1928, what happened? He began to thinking of re-entering the politics. That year, there was All India campaign in opposition to all white Simon Commission. In Simon Commission protest, go back Simon protest, actually Gandhi didn't participate in it, but he gave his blessings. Okay, that is a point to be noted. In the end of December 1929, Congress had its annual session in Lahore. Okay, and there Jawaharlal Nehru was elected as the president, signifying the passing of the baton to the leadership of the younger generation. And there is another important point: commitment to Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. Now, the pace of politics picked up once more. So, on 26th of January 1960, Independence Day was observed, and flags were hoisted. National flag was hoisted on different venues, and patriotic songs were sung. Okay, and we will see another important thing was soon after observance of the Independence Day, Mahatma Gandhi announced that he would lead a march to break one of the most widely disliked laws in British India, which gave the state a monopoly in the manufacture of salt and sale of salt. His picking on the salt monopoly was another illustration of Gandhi's tactical wisdom. For every Indian household, salt was very important. Yet people were forbidden from making salt even for domestic use, compelling them to buy from shops at high price. Okay, it was because state monopoly was there. This is the image of Mahatma Gandhi marching to Dundee. Okay, and there he came, and but the British people, they failed to recognize the importance of this march. Okay, about the salt march. Uh, and Gandhi began walking towards this ashram, and he broke the salt law by picking up natural salt and making natural salt from Dundee. Okay, and this was imitated in different parts of the country also. Okay, as with the non-cooperation, apart from the officially sanctioned nationalist campaign, there were numerous other streams of protest. Across large parts of India, peasants breached the hated colonial forest laws that kept them and their cattle out of the woods, in which they had once roamed freely. Okay, and the students refused to attend government-run schools, education institutions. Gandhiji's call had encouraged Indians of all classes to make manifest their own discontent with colonial rule. The rulers responded to detaining dissenters. In the wake of the salt march, 60,000 Indians were arrested. Among them was Gandhiji himself. The progress of Gandhi's march to the shore can be traced from the secret reports filed by the police officials. So, where we get the reports, it's from the police officials. These reproduce speeches he gave at the villages en route, in which he called upon local officials to renounce government employment and join freedom struggle. Okay, and all these things were done, and here we can see that certain dialogues from various famous magazines like Time and all, and the massive popular following of the march had Gandhi wrote the Time had made the British rulers desperately anxious. Gandhiji himself, they now saluted as a saint and statesman who was using Christian acts as a weapon against men with Christian beliefs. Okay, the Salt March was notable for at least three reasons. First, if a question comes about why Salt March was important, we can quote some terms from here also. Okay, first, it was this event that first brought Gandhiji to world attention. The march was widely covered by the European and American press. Second, it was the first nationalist activity in which women participated on large numbers. Socialist activists like Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay had pursued Gandhiji not to restrict the protests for men alone. Okay, third, and perhaps most significant, it was a salt march which forced upon the British the realization that their Raj would not last forever, that they would have to devolve some power to the Indians. Okay. To the end, British government convened a series of roundtable conferences. The first meeting was held in November 1930, but without preeminent political leader in India, thus rendering it as an exercise in futility. Then Gandhiji was released from jail on January 1931, and this culminated what is called Gandhiji-REV Pact, in which the following month several long meetings with Viceroy was there, but there was no written agreement from the Viceroy side. That was set by the Nationalist. Okay, and now second roundtable conference was held in London. Gandhiji represented the Congress. However, his claims that his party represented all of India came under challenge. Why? There were three reasons. One, the Muslim League, which said they represented the Muslims. Then there were princely state, said that the Congress did not represent their territory. Then there was a brilliant lawyer and thinker B.R. Ambedkar who urged the Gandhiji and the Congress did not really represent the lowest classes. So that conference also didn't end well. New Viceroy, Lord Willingdon, is deeply unsympathetic the Indian leader. So he even wrote a letter to his sister saying that before without Gandhiji, kind of like without Gandhiji, world will be better, and he is not actually a person that what the world thinks. All these things were said about him in the letter. So another important aspect in 1935, one of the most important act, 1935 Government of India Act, promised some of the representative government. 2 years later, in an election held on the basis of the restricted franchise, Congress won a comprehensive victory. 8 out of 11 provinces had a Congress Prime Minister working under the supervision of the British governor. In September 1939, 2 years after the Congress ministries assumed office, the Second World War broke out. So, Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru were crucial about Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Accordingly, they promised Congress support for the war effort. And in return, when the war ended, India wanted independence. Okay, the offer was refused. In protest, Congress ministries resigned in October 1939. Though 1940 and 1941, Congress organized series of individual Satyagrahas to pressure the rulers to promise freedom once the war was ended. Okay. Muslim League also passed resolution demanding measure of autonomy. They wanted separate country. Jinnah wanted a separate country for the Muslim majority areas. So there was a clash between Muslim League and the Congress, and also British were involved. In this time, Britain had a all-party government whose Labour members were sympathetic to Indian aspirations, but whose conservative Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, was a die-hard imperialist who insisted that he had not been appointed the King's first minister in order to proceed over the liquidation of British Empire. Churchill was persuaded to send one of his ministers, Stafford Cripp's mission to India to try and forge a compromise with Gandhi and the Congress. Talks broke down, however, after Congress insisted that if it was to help the British defend India from the Axis powers, then the Viceroy had first to appoint an Indian as a defense member of his executive council. Okay, now Quit India happens. After the failure of Cripp's mission, Mahatma Gandhi decided to launch third major movement against the British rule. It was a Quit India movement. Gandhiji was jailed at once. Younger activists organized strikes and acts of sabotage all over the country, particularly active in the underground resistance of social members of the Congress, like Jayaprakash Narayanan, all were involved in the process. And Quit India was genuinely a mass movement, and bringing into it ambient hundreds and thousands of ordinary Indians, especially and as the young who were in large numbers left their colleges. Same thing happened. Okay, and Jinnah and his colleagues in Muslim League worked patiently to expanding their influence. This was these years that the League began to make a mark in the Punjab and Sindh provinces, where it previously had scarcely any presence. Okay, Punjab and Sindh areas are now past Pakistan. Okay. In June 1944, with the end of the war, Ncert Gandhiji was released from prison. Okay, this is an image of the woman procession in the Quit India movement. It is in Mumbai. Okay, he held a series of meetings with Jinnah, seeking to bridge the gap between the Congress and League. Okay, but a Labour government came into power in Britain and committed itself to granting independence to India. Meanwhile, back in India, the Viceroy Lord brought Congress and League together in a series of talks. And new election took place. Congress again won in the general category, and Muslim League also won in their on specific reserved category areas. The political polarization was complete. Now, cabinet machine sent in the summer failed to get Congress and League to agree on the federal system. After talks broke down, Jinnah called the direct action day to press the League's demand for Pakistan. On the designated day, in 16th August 1946, bloody riots broke down in Calcutta. The violence spread in rural Bengal, then to Bihar, then across the country of the United Provinces. United Provinces is now Uttar Pradesh and Punjab. In some places, Muslims were the victims. In other places, we had Hindus. Okay, and a new viceroy came into the picture, Lord Mountbatten. Mountbatten called one last round of talks in which he announced the British India would be freed, but also divided. The formal transfer of powers was fixed on 15th August when the day came. It was celebrated in different parts of Delhi. Okay, and in the Constituent Assembly, the President of the Constituent Assembly began meeting by invoking the father of the nation, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, outside the assembly. The crowds shouted Mahatma Gandhi ki jai, but he was not there. That is the best part. As it happened, Mahatma Gandhi was not present at the festivities in the capital. He was in Calcutta, but he did not attend any function or hoist a flag there either. Gandhiji marked the day with a 24-hour fast. Freedom he had struggled so long had came at an unacceptable price, with the nation divided between religion, Hindus and Muslims. Okay, and he appealed to the Sikhs, the Hindus and Muslims, to forget the past and not to dwell in their sufferings, but to extend the right hand of fellowship towards each other and determined to live in peace. And he visited many hospitals and tried to console people. Okay, the Congress wished to assure they wanted to assure that the minorities in India will be safe under their rule. Okay, many scholars had returned the months after the independence, being Gandhiji's finest. After working in great peace in Bengal, Gandhiji now shifted to Delhi. Okay, now and he was also concerned with the sufferings of the minority community in Pakistan as well. And there was an attempt on Gandhiji's life on 20th January 1948, but he carried on undaunted. He was safe. And on 26th January, he spoke at his prayer meeting how the day had been celebrated in the past was an Independence Day. Now freedom has come. And he trusted the worst is over. And 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 we will see that on his daily prayer meeting on the evening of 30th January, Gandhiji was shot dead by a young man. The assassin, who surrendered afterwards, was a Brahmin from Pune, Nathuram Godse, the editor of the extremist Hindu newspaper, who had denounced Gandhiji as an appeaser of Muslims. And Gandhiji died. This is a representation in which actually two ideologies. We can see Gandhiji's funeral over here. Gandhiji is taken in heaven and is blessing the people. Here we can see Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. These two people are important because these two people represented two different ideologies. Patel was a conservative and Jawaharlal Nehru was a socialist. So these two ideologies often clashed. So Gandhiji was in the middle of the two ideologies, we can say. Okay. And we can see the Western press and all comparing Gandhiji to that of Lincoln, and the same kind of death that Lincoln received can be seen in that of Gandhiji's death. All these things are said. So in here we will look at how accounts were made on the basis of the life of Gandhi, all these aspects, mainly through newspapers from common people, writings, write-ups. Many letters were written to individuals, and the language of those returns shaped by awareness. They may one day be published. Okay, and Mahatma Gandhi regularly published his journal, Harijan, letters that this can be asked. What was Mahatma Gandhi's journal? Letters that others wrote to him. Nehru edited a collection of letters written to him during the national movement and published a bunch of old letters. Okay, and also these are some of the sources, even letters also. Okay, just go through it. Then autobiographies similarly give us an account of the past that is often rich in human detail. All these aspects, just go through it, just read through it. Nothing that much of an importance, but all these autobiographies, names, and journal, Gandhi's journal, all these aspects are important to some extent if you are preparing for government exams. Okay, so with that, I'll conclude today's lecture. So until we see again next time, God bless you all. Jai Hind.